Hello, and welcome to this episode of Redefining the Customer Journey, where we take a deep dive into how anyone, from a local small business owner up to a corporate CEO, can build a modern business that is flexible and able to quickly adapt and evolve. Specifically, in this episode, we're going to give you some major takeaways on the topic of pipeline stages and your sales process. With these easy to implement business principles, you're going to make more money while saving hundreds of hours by implementing a few simple steps. We've all seen businesses collapse because they were built on weak foundations, riddled with problems in their day to day, which are also unnecessarily complex to grow and scale. We want to help you build something that leverages your time and resources for maximum effectiveness without sacrificing your customer experience. I'm Paul Sokol, founder of Be Pro, best-selling author of Infusionsoft cookbook, which contains over 80 CRM-based business recipes for automated follow-up, and I've been helping small to medium-sized businesses under 50 million grow with automation since 2008.
And I'm Bobby Purcell, founder of LeadPass.com, which helps you set your business processes on autopilot to free up more time for making sales. And I've been in automation since 2016, primarily in the financial space and service-based businesses. In each episode, we are going to cover one specific CRM topic to explain what it is, why it's important, common problems, and the best solution we've seen throughout our experience. So as we mentioned, today's episode is going to be all about pipeline stages and opportunity stages. And let's dive into it. So where do we start, Paul?
Well, let's first of all explain what this is. So pipeline stages. I would say that these are the 10,000-foot milestones in a sales or a fulfillment process. It could also be an internal process too. You could use a pipeline for hiring, which we're going to talk about in episode 12 when we get to the employee experience. It's those high level milestones of your sales process, not the ground level stuff.
Yeah, and it also lays out the actionable plan for your salespeople. So when they sign into their dashboard at the beginning of the day and they look at all the different people that they need to call or the actions that they have to do, it's a clear, concise plan that lets them know their entire sales pipeline in one easy to view area.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a big takeaway is that it's not only just the milestones, it's that actionable plan. So, hey, I've got 5 people in contracts sent. There's 20 new leads that I need to call. There's 3 people that I'm engaging with to see if it's worth their time. All that kind of stuff. So that's what they are. So let's talk about why these are important. And I think for me, I would say that by having really clearly defined pipeline stages, it provides a safety net so that way no single individual ever slips through the cracks. Because it's very easy when you're working with databases and CRMs to just like look at a list of people and forget that every single name on that list is a real human being with, friends and family and fears and challenges and goals and all that jazz. And so when you have really good and clearly outlined stages, you can make sure that wherever somebody's at, the rep or whatever, the account manager or for whatever the pipeline is, you can always pay attention to those people.
Yeah, so it really helps out mapping the sales cycle like Paul's talking about right now. So, okay, we have a new lead coming in today. We need to call them twice a day for the first 3 days to make sure that, we get in front of them. We're talking to them. We're trying to convert them into a sale or moving them from a possibly interested, Facebook lead form into, someone who's actually qualified. So then they would move into like a warm nurture if they haven't been able to be talked to in the first couple of days to once a day and then twice a week. And then eventually they would fall into the cold nurture cycle campaigns if they were never able to be spoken to. But with all that data, you can empower your KPIs over time. So you can say, okay, my salespeople are calling twice a day on time, or hey, Jim, you did not call any of these new leads. What's going on? I'm wasting a ton of money here.
Yeah, and even looking at like the stages and the stage movements themselves too, because again, it's not necessarily just for the sales cycle too. If you have a complex fulfillment cycle, like let's say you have like a really high touch coaching program, you want to, for example, you could have a stage of like the new participant, and then maybe that like their onboarding call is complete is the next milestone, right? And then the next milestone is that like they've done their like their coaching intake or like their coach has been assigned, like those kinds of 10,000-foot views. Because yeah, now we can look at the data. Hey, we had 20 people come to the new participant. You know, Three of them took more than 4 days to get to that onboarding complete. Why did it take that long when everybody else moved it through, right? Um, the other thing too, like why good pipeline stages are important, is because it makes it easier to onboard and train your team as well. Because if everybody's all using the exact same stages and everybody's clear on what each stage means and what needs to happen to get someone to the next stage, you can absolutely standardize your training. And assuming they have the base soft skill competencies of selling or customer support, or even hiring, whatever the pipeline's for, you can bring them in and be like, here's the stages, here's how to use your dashboard, and here's our talk tracks or whatever the case is. Um,
And what you find over time is when you get to, let's say, stage 3, most of the people will have a bunch of different questions. So if you're tracking at stage 3, these are the typical questions that our new hires are having or our new possible sales prospects are having. You can nip it in the bud before it even comes up and address the challenges that they're going to ask about before you're even there. So it makes the customer journey way smoother.
Yeah.
Because they've already had all their answers, the questions answered before they came up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I say that's probably like the big takeaway of like why pipeline stages are important. It lets you track and understand that customer journey. So again, nobody ever slips through the cracks. So let's talk about some of the common issues with pipeline stages themselves. And I would say that probably one of the biggest things that I see, because I love doing sales pipelines, one of my favorite things in the world to do. Um, I see that just having a lack of clarity into what a specific stage means is huge. You'll have a stage that's just the name of it is kind of loosey goosey, or it's something that's like open for interpretation. Like the stage will be appointment. It's like, okay, well, does that mean that they have an appointment scheduled? Does it mean that they completed the appointment? What does that mean? So that's a big issue I see when I come in to fix pipeline stages.
And a lot of the time too, people can put the lead or the prospect into the wrong pipeline stage due to manual error. So if you manually move a pipeline stage, a client from one pipeline stage to the other, and they're not supposed to be in there, you end up having horrible data. It doesn't make sense. The KPIs aren't tracked. And if your automations are doing the same thing, placing a lead in the pipeline before it makes sense, everything else can kind of derail the trade.
Yeah, and I want to highlight something that you said about placing it in the pipeline before it makes sense. There's a big difference between like a marketing qualified lead and a sales qualified lead. And when we're talking about specifically a sales pipeline, that is to track sales qualified leads. So like just because somebody opts in to download your little lead magnet ebook, that doesn't mean we need to go ahead and put them into some sales reps queue to call, right? That at best they're marketing qualified. Now, depending on your lead flow, maybe that is okay. But like when you're working with like larger teams and larger businesses, you might have hundreds of people opting in every single day, and if you've only got a couple of sales reps, that's going to blow them up real quick. So maybe do not create an opportunity or don't create a lead as soon as they opt in. Maybe wait until they actually download the thing that they want, or maybe give them a survey to ask them, hey, who are you? What do you need? And then if they answer that survey, then go ahead and create it. But that's something that I see is like, because a pipeline, it's always a manual kind of thing. It's there. I like to say it's like a personal assistant for you to help keep track of where people are at. And so if you've got like thousands of people in your pipeline, that is unrealistic for any one single human. And when I see that behavior, that means that either they're not necessarily they're never closing a lead, which is a totally different issue, or they're just creating too many opportunities when they're not qualified to spend that human labor. Uh, and I'll get off my soapbox on that one.
when we're talking about like the human interactions, like sometimes people will see that a lead has fallen into a certain pipeline stage, and instead of addressing them right away, they're waiting for the back-end automation to send them a text message, send them an email, use an outbound voice AI instead of actually just picking up the phone and calling their leads that they're supposed to be doing themselves, because they know that there's a back-end process that will do it for them if they don't meet their obligations and what they're really supposed to be doing to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's a huge one that you should always be mindful of.
Yeah, don't let your people use the automation as an excuse to be lazy. If you do have any automation around a particular pipeline stage, it should be supplementing what your team should be doing in the first place. You know, um, and that's a really good one. Um, so one other thing uh, that I see a lot with pipelines in particular is not using custom pipeline fields. So we talked about custom fields in episode 4, and one of the common issues was not using different kinds of fields per record. But you can totally have custom pieces of data at the contact level and custom pieces of data at the lead or the pipeline or the opportunity level that's specific to the sales process. And you can search on that stuff. You can segment based on that kind of stuff, and that's a huge advantage. And if you're not using custom opportunity fields, even just a couple of them, you're you're missing a lot of the power. Absolutely, in my opinion.
Some of the other things too is not having enough pipeline stages or having too many. So
Yes.
sometimes you'll see, new lead in, contacted, sold. Well, there's also a lot of other things that can happen between those pipeline stages that you might want to do. So like new lead enters, warm lead, kind of cold lead, booked appointment, confirmed booked appointment, sold, or not qualified. And usually you should have anywhere between 7 to 12 in most builds for pipeline stages when it comes to sales, but I've seen ones that have like 30, and
Mm-hmm.
so many of them are redundant. So when you're going back to that planning stage, and one of the previous episodes that we did, I think it was number 2, that's really important to actually see exactly what you want to do for each of the pipeline stages and the automations that correlate with them, so that you don't end up running into redundancy or not having enough stages for your pipelines, for your sales guys to understand what their pipelines are.
Yes, and that's actually another common issue as well. Is that I'm glad you said that. Not every single stage needs automation. Like there's some stages that you literally cannot automate because it's always going to be unique to the specific conversation that's happening. Or at the most you can have like a contract sent stage. Maybe the most that you can automate is an immediate email that says, hey, I sent you a contract, let me know if you have any questions, right? And then that's it. Maybe there's some functional automation under the hood, but you absolutely you should not always assume you're going to have automation for every pipeline stage. So yeah, when you're getting to that planning process, think of I like to I tell people to think of the stages like a set of stairs, where each stair is a meaningful 10,000-foot milestone. Because otherwise, like you said, Bobby, you'll end up with either like a bunch of redundant stages or things like that. Like I've seen people where they'll have like call one, call two, like up through 10 calls. That's literally ground level activities, guys. You can just have one single, and these are calls just to get this new lead engaged, right? You can just have one stage called contacting. And then if somebody's in contacting, that means that we haven't heard back from them. We're not engaging with them. We certainly haven't qualified them. We definitely haven't done any appointments. Um, and we can't have automation to support that, but that would not necessarily be a stage. So,
Well, that's a good point too, because let's say you have someone to call and that's a pipeline stage. If you call them, it will remove them from that stage. Sometimes, if that's how you want it to be built up, it will have a wait timer and then put it back to that stage, so that when you come to the beginning of the day and saying, hey, look, I have 15 people to call, I call them all on that individual section of my pipeline. The action from calling out dispositions the call, it removes them from the list and only adds it back once the timer has been done, so that you know how many days. It's really good for sales managers too, because if you pull up, Jimmy's midday and there's all these things that haven't been called, um, it's way easier to tell what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So that's
yes,
just something to keep in mind. You can pull things off of pipeline stages and automate them to go back in,
mm-hmm.
so that they're clean.
Yes, yes. And you talked about day to day usage. That's another common issue that I see is that uh, the leaders, the managers, will not configure and set up the dashboards and the necessary searches to enable day to day use. If you're a sales rep or account manager or whatever, they should be able to log into their CRM, and then their dashboard says is ground control. This is what you need to do today, So it's not just enough to set up the stages and then to set up automations and things like that. You need to, because a pipeline, again, it's always a manual. It's a manual accountability tool, so you always need to make sure that the dashboards are set up, the safe searches are set up, and it's also consistent too. That if you have 10 sales reps, all 10 of them have the exact same dashboard, and it's just showing their leads specifically, which also feeds into earlier we were talking about faster onboarding and training here. So we've talked about some solutions with our common issues here, but what are some specific solutions around this stuff, Bobby, as we wrap up here?
Yeah, based on your last talking point, some of the best solutions is make it clean, clear, and easily labeled. So when new agents are using it for the first time, they can clearly understand what each stage means. It comes back to the naming conventions. It comes back to the planning stages. If I have a new rep that I'm onboarding right now, they should be able to clearly see the stages and understand it without having 15 paragraphs of like what is contacted me, what, and then they have this wrongful information of, oh, I thought contacted means I don't have to contact them anymore because they've already been contacted.
Yeah.
So just clean and clear labeled, and have one document explaining each stage, but make it so that it's very easy to understand.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And then also with that too, you want to make sure that there's a clear start and a clear finish of the pipeline. Um, Eventually, uh, you're following up with people until it's either you clearly won the deal or they lost. But that's it. There always needs to be that, you know, one of those two terminating points. You never want to have a pipeline that just has like thousands of leads that you're never calling again, but you've never officially marked them as lost either. That's that's just not good, because now you don't have real numbers. You can't actually track what's going on. How many leads do you have in your pipeline, Bobby? I got 3,000. Well, no, you don't. 70% of those are probably lost because they're more than 6 months old, and you've just been building it up. There's nothing wrong with saying, listen, we're not making the sale. Close that lead, get it out of your pipeline. Focus on the people that are actually engaging.
Yeah, and like a best solution that talks about that when you have all these sales reps that are doing follow-up calls and things like that is because you can track how long they're in a pipeline stage, and you can track through VoIP, when my sales reps are actually calling out, or when they're texting them, or when they're emailing them manually. You can tell on big data over time how often they're actually missing up on their follow-ups and how much money that's actually costing you. So if you know that it takes on average 6 to 8 times to follow up with someone before they purchase, and half of your sales reps are only reaching out between 2 and 4 times, you know that the rest of it is just being left on the table.
Yes.
So that's a huge one, tracking of the KPIs and what your salespeople are actually doing.
Yes. And so I think the cherry on top for that, of tracking what they're doing, is as leadership, as your sales managers, do periodic pipeline cleanups. Like, if I was a sales manager and I had a team of people, at maybe once a week, at least every 2 weeks, sit down with each person individually, go look at their pipeline, update the stuff, close out stuff that needs to be closed, move things ahead that needs to be moved, um, and lead these people, develop them. You got to have periodic pipeline cleanups. Otherwise, it's like anything else. It's like having a trash can that you never take out. It's just gonna get gross over time. So I'd say that's probably the biggest takeaway, is not only do you want your stages super meaningful, once they're built and it's in use, you got to clean out those pipelines, periodically. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. So I guess let's end it here, Bobby. I want to say thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please let us know in the comments, and make sure you watch the next episode where we're talking about automated follow-up. So this is an extension of the last episode with the workflows. We're getting more ground level on the actual automation. So make sure you subscribe now if you haven't already, so you don't miss it. If you'd like to learn more about customer journeys, you can get my free How to Automate Like a Pro mini course. If you would like some pre-built customer journey automations, Bobby is giving those away for free, and the links to get either of those are in the description. So have a great day, and we will see you next time.